God is dead, and we killed him. These chilling words by Friedrich Nietzsche shook the world, yet behind this bold declaration lay a man consumed by loneliness and mental torment. Nietzsche's life, though filled with revolutionary ideas, was also marked by profound tragedy. From his strained relationship with his sister to the mysterious illness that plagued him, his existence was a series of heartbreaking events. What secrets lay behind his descent into madness, and how did his shocking end leave the world in awe? Born in Rücken, a small town in the Prussian province of Saxony, Nietzsche was the son of Karl Ludwig Nietzsche and Franziska Nietzsche. He grew up in a very religious household, with his father Karl working as a Lutheran pastor. The couple had 2 more children, Elizabeth and Ludwig Joseph. However, his father was diagnosed with a brain disease that ultimately claimed his life when Friedrich was just 4 years old. 6 months later, Nietzsche's younger brother Ludwig also passed away. The sudden demise of both of his loved ones led his family to move to Naumburg to live with his maternal grandmother. Since his father had worked as a pastor, Nietzsche received a scholarship to study at a boarding school in Naumburg. There he learned French, Greek, Latin, and Hebrew, and he also led a music club, Germania, as he was a devout admirer of the German composer Richard Wagner. However, the boy who once grew up in a deeply religious household began to doubt his faith in God, evident when he wrote to his sister saying, quote, "Hence the ways of men part. If you wish to strive for peace of soul and pleasure, then believe. If you wish to be a devotee of truth, then inquire." Slowly, he started studying the works of Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the few thinkers whom he deeply admired. In 1867, Nietzsche had to enter mandatory military service, only to be discharged after suffering a serious chest injury. Despite that, he was hailed as a fine rider, and his fellow officers believed that he would reach the rank of captain. However, destiny had other plans for Nietzsche, as he continued his studies in Leipzig. At 24 years old, he was offered a prestigious position as a professor of classical philology at the University of Basel in Switzerland. This was also where he met his idol Richard Wagner, and they both formed a close relationship. He regularly visited Wagner and his wife Cosima at their home in Switzerland. He admired Wagner as a genius artist whose music could restore art to the heights of ancient Greek tragedy. As a composer, Nietzsche also gifted one of his compositions to Cosima as a present. However, Wagner mocked his piano composition, and even the German conductor and pianist Hans von Bülow described Nietzsche's pieces as, quote, "the most undelightful and the most anti-musical draft on musical paper that I have faced in a long time." Even though the Wagners saw Nietzsche as a loyal friend, they were more interested in using him as an outlet for embedding Wagner's artistic legacy into the philosophical world. Over the next few years, Nietzsche became increasingly involved with the Wagner family. 2 years later, in 1872, Nietzsche published his first book, The Birth of Tragedy. However, many of his fellow scholars criticized his work for using his own speculative approach rather than the standard approach. Despite this, the Wagners praised his work, with Cosima describing it as the most explicit expression of Wagnerian thought. After feeling isolated from the other scholars, Nietzsche attempted to change positions to a philosophy position at the university, but unfortunately he was rejected. So he carried on with his words and wrote 4 lengthy essays critiquing German culture between 1873 and 1876 under the influence of Schopenhauer and Wagner, titled Untimely Meditations. However, Nietzsche began to drift away from their ideas and developed his own, which was totally different. The sudden shifts intensified after his disappointment with the 1876 Bayreuth Festival, which he found shallow and extremely supportive of German nationalism, something he vehemently opposed. In 1878, Nietzsche's writing took a new direction with Human, All Too Human, which rejected the pessimistic views of Wagner and Schopenhauer through a series of aphorisms. It was also during this time that his already fragile health started to deteriorate even further. He frequently suffered from migraines that caused excruciating pain lasting for days. This left him incapacitated and unable to work or read. He even lost the ability to write, relying on his former student Heinrich Koselleck, who later became his secretary. Koselleck was one of the few people Nietzsche allowed to criticize him, and was also his most loyal friend alongside Malwinde von Meyensburg, who acted as his maternal patron. However, his health showed no signs of recovery as his migraines became frequent and unpredictable. He was increasingly disturbed, which took away his ability to maintain a regular schedule, putting him in a difficult spot. Not only that, Nietzsche wasn't lucky with women either. After releasing the first part of his book, Die Philosophische Wissenschaft, he met Lou Salome, and it was love at first sight. After knowing that his friend Paul Rée had failed to win her heart, Nietzsche decided to give it a try. But much to his surprise, Salome suggested that the three of them live together and form a commune in an abandoned monastery. Nietzsche agreed, and the trio set off on their journey to Switzerland and Italy. But little did he know that he was just a cog in the wheel for Salome's experiment. During their journey, Nietzsche proposed to marry her multiple times, but she turned him down. This left Nietzsche heartbroken, but he never gave up. Even though they spent the summer traveling together and making plans to live communally, Nietzsche's romantic feelings for Salome didn't stop. When Elisabeth heard the news, she wanted to separate her brother from Salome, whom she called an immoral woman. She joined her brother and Salome for the summer at Tautenberg. However, Nietzsche became increasingly frustrated, which led to an argument with Salome in Leipzig. After the argument, Paul and Salome left Nietzsche with no plans of meeting again. This made Nietzsche very upset and very unhappy. He blamed his sister for the failed attempt to live together, and he wrote to his friend saying, quote, "We shall see one another from time to time, won't we?" But it was already too late, as both Paul and Salome never met him again. So Nietzsche decided to leave for Rapallo, where he wrote the first part of his famous book, Also sprach Zarathustra, in 10 days. However, it was his controversial statement, God is dead, that made Nietzsche truly famous. His bold declaration not only earned him popularity, but was also equally condemned by many in Germany. The phrase first appeared in his book, Die Philosophische Wissenschaft, where a madman runs into a marketplace claiming that God is dead and we have killed him. He believed that the Germans were gradually moving towards an irreligious society, and this decline of religion would lead to what Nietzsche called nihilism, the belief that life lacks meaning, purpose, or inherent value. He realized that without God, people would no longer have something to tell them what was right and what was wrong. In order to solve this, he proposed for an idea for how individuals could create their own values instead of getting them from God. He called this ideal person the Übermensch, who could decide for himself what was essential and what to live for. However, Nietzsche believed that only some people would actually be able to become Übermensch. He thought most people were too weak and would instead become the last man. According to Nietzsche, the last man would just go along with what everyone else does and live a life without thinking for themselves. As he put out his thoughts in the book Thus Spoke Zarathustra, stating, quote, "For the game of creation, my brothers, a sacred yes is indeed. The spirit now wills its own will." But much to Nietzsche's surprise, people laughed at his idea, not understanding its true meaning. By then, Nietzsche's mental health was already rapidly declining. While he was in Turin in 1889, he saw a coachman brutally wiping a horse, and it was literally too much for him. He ran over and hugged the horse, sharing its pain. After that, he started to weep until he collapsed on the ground. From that point, things only got crazier as Nietzsche wasn't himself anymore. He would start screaming at the top of his lungs, play his idol Wagner's music on the piano like a maniac, and talk gibberish day and night. He also started writing letters claiming that he was Dionysus, reborn to save humanity. In one letter to Meta von Salis-Marschlins, he said, quote, "Don't you see how all the heavens are rejoicing? I have just seized possession of my kingdom. I've thrown the Pope in prison, and I'm having Wilhelm, Bismarck, and Sturcher shot." he was admitted to a mental asylum in Jena. Eventually, his mother Franziska got custody of him and took him back to Naumburg. But Nietzsche didn't change for the better. One night, he escaped from the apartment and wandered around the streets naked. Luckily, a policeman found him and brought him back to his mother. Even though the incident went completely unnoticed, Franziska worried that it might happen again, and her son might be thrown back into the asylum. So she took him back to their childhood home and cared for him until she passed away. During this time, it was as if Nietzsche had turned into a complete child. He would frantically make noises and behave childishly. Not to forget, his mental state was so fragile that his mother had to place sweet fruits in his mouth to calm him down. He began playing with dolls and often was accompanied by his mother holding his arm like a toddler. He forgot much of his literary works and often talked only about Hannibal, Moltke, and his former idol, Schopenhauer. When his mother asked, "Do you want to eat?" he replied, quote, "Do I have a mouth for it? Should I eat that? My mouth, I say. I want to eat. What is that? Nice milk, I always liked. What do we want to eat now? Precisely the thing. Will that taste good? That is tasty. What else do we want to eat? Nice things. Who will eat this? Eat it yourself. What does Frau Pastor have? Beautiful eyes." Sadly, Franziska never saw her son recover and passed away in 1897, leaving Nietzsche to his sister. From then on, Nietzsche's legal guardian became his sister Elisabeth, and they both moved to Weimar. In the following years, he suffered from 2 strokes that left him partially paralyzed, struggled to speak or walk. His condition deteriorated further as he lost control of the left side of his body. He also contracted pneumonia and spent most of his time on the balcony of Villa Silberblich, his home. On the night of August 24th, he suffered another massive stroke, and the next day, the man who announced the death of God died. He was 55 years old. Despite their rocky relationship, his sister Elisabeth took care of him and buried him next to their father at the church near their hometown in Rocken. However, since she and her husband Bernhard Forster were massive supporters of Hitler's ideology, she began to misinterpret his works to support anti-Semitism. This led to Nietzsche's work being associated with Nazism, and it was not until the 20th century that scholars Walter Kaufmann and R.J. Hollingdale released corrected versions that aligned with what they believed Nietzsche meant. Nevertheless, Nietzsche's story is a fascinating tale of how a brilliant mind can be both a gift and a curse. His philosophical ideas challenged traditional thinking and paved the way for new perspectives on morality and religion. However, he never lived up to the expectations and was hated by many, even after his death. As Heinemann puts it, quote, "No philosopher ever suffered as Nietzsche suffered." If you enjoyed this video, then subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss any more interesting stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.